Good afternoon. Thank all of you for being here. I want to thank Sarah Wells visited TG Kentucky this morning. Thank Tim for the hospitality that you have showed us there, and the good conversation we had about workforce development. And Congressman Comer is visiting with us today, and we'll get him up here, and he will enlighten us on what's going on in Washington.
But as Jimmy said, we got a tour. I got a tour for the first time. TG Kentucky, appreciate everything that you all do for the economy here. I think they said around 1,091 employees. That would probably put that plant in the top 10 employers in my congressional district. And if you've never seen the map of the congressional district, I know I was talking to a couple of people. It's there's a little term called gerrymandering. It's Lebanon's not in the same congressional district as Lexington, Somerset, or Bowling Green, but you are with Paducah. So I live in Monroe County, kind of in the center of the congressional district. But it's a great congressional district. 35 really good counties. We're blessed to have a lot of quality manufacturing, especially automotive parts manufacturing. We also have one of the biggest agricultural economies of any congressional district in America. So I love the congressional district. I wanted to just informally, briefly give you kind of an update in Washington, especially on the main issue that I think impacts every single person in this room, because it impacts the economy. We didn't talk about it today because I know your meeting was about workforce development. But I wanted to touch on the tariffs, where we are currently with the potential trade war, and how I see this playing out. But I wanted to mention, because we have some agriculture people in here as well, the Farm Bill, everything's going according to plan. The Farm Bill is a piece of legislation that comes around every 5 years. There's no legislation, there's no bill that has a greater impact on agriculture than the Farm Bill. The current Farm Bill expires September 30th. So today's August the 20th. We have to get a Farm Bill signed by the President before September 30th. And what happens in Congress is similar to what happens in Frankfurt. For a bill to become a law, it has to pass the House of Representatives and the Senate. I'm in the House of Representatives. We have 6 U.S. representatives in Kentucky. There are 435 representatives in Washington. So the House of Representatives passes a bill. Then at the same time, while we're doing the bill, the United States Senate, where there are 100, 2 from each state, they work on the same piece of legislation. And in Frankfurt, you'll pass a bill in the Senate, then it'll go to the House, or the House will pass a bill, and then it goes to the Senate. In Washington, they just both work on the bill at the same time, and then appoint a conference committee to iron out the differences. So if you have 435 representatives and 100 senators, that's 535 members of Congress. I will say this, as long as I'm in Congress, the biggest problem with Congress is there are too many congressmen, right? So you will never get those 535 to come to a consensus, so they appoint a few people in the House and a few people in the Senate to take each version and come up with a consensus. And then the conference committee gets to vote on it, and then it's voted on in the House and the Senate and can't be amended and all of that. So I'm on the conference committee in the House, Senator McConnell's on it in the Senate, and we've got an agreement on 95% of the bill. The one disagreement is the one that you'll see on the news. It doesn't matter which station, Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, whatever, they're going to be talking a lot about this. In addition to agriculture policy, there's also food policy on there. So all what we used to call food stamps, that's funded through the Farm Bill. In fact, that's the biggest cost piece of the Farm Bill. So I support government safety net programs for people that need it. If someone lost their job, if someone's disabled, if there's an elderly person, if there's children can't help the fact that they're in a poverty situation. If you have single moms, pregnant moms, that's what the food program was supposed to be for. It was supposed to be a safety net, temporary program. But what's happened over time, it's like a lot of other government welfare programs, or however you want to call it, they've become entitlements. Instead of temporary safety nets, they've become entitlements. We have a strong economy. they talked about this morning what every big employer in my congressional district and every big employer in Kentucky talks about. We have a hard time finding workers. We have a hard time finding, especially entry-level workers. So you look at the economy in America right now, it's strong. It's as strong as that I can ever remember it. I've been in this for 18 years in Congress, in the State House, and Ag Commissioner. Never remember a situation where in all 35 counties, every big employer is struggling to find workers. So there's never been a better time, in my opinion, for welfare reform. Let's try to identify people that can work and try to incentivize them to get in the workforce and work with our area workforce development groups, area technology centers to try to help provide training and things like that. So all that's in the Farm Bill. We passed that out of the House. Basically work requirements for able-bodied, mainly men, that receive food stamps, work 20 hours a week to try to introduce many of these people. And I use Monroe County as an example, 4th generation now that are on government assistance to try to take advantage of this strong economy and pass a welfare reform component. It did not, the Senate version did not have that, mainly because in the Senate it takes 60 votes to pass a bill. If you'll think about the Senate, you have 51 Republicans, 49 Democrats. Everything's a party line vote in the Senate. It's very hard to get to 60. That's why a lot of bills aren't passing the United States Senate. So we're trying to iron out the differences, and there's really, you either do it or you don't. That's where we are right now. You can't do part of it. So we've got about 30 more days at the most to try to come up with an agreement on the Farm Bill, a consensus. I'm pushing for the welfare reform component because I think that is something that we have to do. We're not taking as good of advantage of this strong economy as we can because we have a lot of people that aren't in the workforce. And I recognize that, and I think a lot of people in Washington recognize that, but for whatever reason, it's been a little more difficult than I feel like it should. We're going to keep trying for that. But at the end of the day, the agriculture part of the Farm Bill, I think our farmers are going to be very satisfied with. We have a very strong farm economy in Kentucky, and I think that this policy will shape it well over the next 5 years. So I wanted to mention the Farm Bill. Next, I want to talk about the tariffs, because the tariffs obviously are affecting agriculture, but probably more so than agriculture right now is the automotive industry that's affected by the tariffs. And it's really disrupted the supply chain. If you ask me from 100 miles away, do you support tariffs or not? I'll say no, I don't support tariffs. But we've got a situation in the United States now to where we're at a competitive disadvantage with China. And I'm going to talk about China more than any other country. We have trade agreements dating back to 1964 where you're not allowed to do things like dumping, you're not allowed to steal patents, you're not allowed to steal intellectual property and things like that. We have a great trading relationship with Japan. We have a great trading relationship with Canada. We have a great trading relationship with Mexico. Our European Union, not so good. China, I don't think it's a good situation. The last 3 presidents, Democrat and Republican, have talked about doing something about the trade deficit with China. They've talked about it. They've talked about it. They've never done anything about it. And the deficit's widened. And I believe that if we're going to revitalize rural America, we have a lot of rural communities that have not done as well as you all have done here in Marion County in establishing a strong industrial base. If we're going to revitalize and rebuild rural America, we're going to have manufacturing. And if we can't compete on a level playing field with China, if we keep losing ground, if we keep making things and investing in research and development for iPhones, for example, and once they come out on the market, they're taking them apart, stealing our patents and stealing our technology, that's a problem. So what the president wants to do is have a new bilateral trade agreement with China. And it started out, as everyone knows, with aluminum and steel, and it's evolved now into soybeans and tobacco and bourbon and everything else. So I'm getting weekly updates from the Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, and his Deputy Secretary, Bill Northey, who was Agriculture Commissioner in Iowa when I was Ag Commissioner in Kentucky. And they feel like that we're making progress. And they feel like in the next few months that this will start to go back to normal and we'll have some type of bilateral trade agreement. I feel like maybe even this week we announced something with Mexico, a very positive development with Mexico, and then that we can try to get it worked out with China. I know that it's created a lot of panic, it's created a lot of hardships, especially in the automotive industry. I feel very bad for the plant managers that are having to make decisions with the disruption in the supply chains and the inflation for the metal and aluminum. But I think that when we get past this short-term pain, we're going to have long-term gain, because we can't keep giving up industries to China, not because they're more innovative, not because they have better research and development, not because they have better skilled workers or harder workers, not because they have better, infrastructure or anything. It's because they manipulate the market. They manipulate their currency, which is a huge disadvantage to American manufacturing. So I feel like that we've inherited a situation with a huge trade deficit that needed to be resolved. And I hope, in listening to the Trump administration and the cabinet officials, we've had several briefings by Wilbur Ross, who's the Secretary for Commerce, that we feel like we're making progress. And it's affected a lot of people in the United States, but I can assure you it's affecting a lot of people in China more, because if a plant lays off in the United States, we have unemployment. We have safety net programs. Nobody likes to have to draw that or do that, but there's a safety net component there. They don't have that in China. And there's a lot of unrest now in China with workers because their standard of living has really increased a lot over the last decade. And nobody wants to go backwards. When your standard of living increases, you at least want to maintain your current standard of living. You don't want to go backwards. So I feel like we're at the point now where talks have rapidly increased. We're starting to see specific proposals being discussed, and I hope and pray that we can get this resolved very, very soon. So I just wanted to give an update on the tariff situation. I'm a soybean farmer. I know exactly what the price of soybeans are today. I know exactly how much they've gone down since the announcement of the tariffs. And the automotive industry, the automotive parts industry, is the biggest part of manufacturing in my congressional district. So I wanted to mention that because we have a great corporate citizen in the room today that I'm sure has been negatively impacted by the tariff situation. I wanted to kind of give an update about that from Washington. But with that, I thought if anybody had any questions, Tom, I would try to answer them or anything. Yes, sir.
Congressman, I'm involved with the rural electric cooperatives.
Yes, sir.
This is a farm bill question.
Yes, sir.
Funding RUS. And I know in the House version they didn't take out our cushion of credit.
Right.
But the Senate did.
Yeah.
And that's very important to us.
Right.
It would really take it out and probably amount to a rate increase.
Mm-hmm. We're trying to get the House version in the final version, and I know I've heard from all the electric cooperatives on that. So I think it'll be better than what the Senate passed. I don't know that it'll be exactly what we had. They may try to meet in the middle somehow, but I know the interest part, that's what you're talking about, the interest-bearing account and all that. Yeah, I'm hopeful that there's a compromise. We're obviously trying to get the House version. That's one of the few things that hadn't been ironed out on the farm side, on the ag side of the farm bill. But I don't think what the Senate put in there is going to stay as it is. I think it's going to, if not, be our version somewhere in between and maybe adjust the interest rate or whatever on that a little bit. But I know how much it potentially costs the electric cooperatives in Kentucky. Yeah. The Senate used that to pay for some things that we're trying to take out of the farm bill. So if those added things aren't in the final version of the farm bill, there won't be any need to change that. So that's why I feel like at least It's going to be better than what the Senate passed. I hope it's what we passed, but I'm very aware of that part of it.
You gonna build a wall?
Are we going to build the wall? Well, I voted for a bill to do that. Very important to the president. I think everybody knows that in here. But again, so the way you're supposed to pass a budget in Frankfurt, you all pass a budget, one big budget. It's called a biennial budget for 2 years. In Washington, we're supposed to do 12 appropriations bills annually. They haven't done that in 6 years. We passed 12 bills out of the House, like Homeland Security. That's what would pay for the wall. You have an agriculture bill. You have a commerce bill. So basically the different cabinets in the federal government have an appropriations bill. Defense, that's a big one. The Department of Defense, that's your military, Pentagon, all of that falls under an appropriations bill. So the House, we passed a Homeland Security bill that provided funding for about half the wall, which is, I mean, you can't build the whole wall in less than a year, probably in less than 5 years, the way things work, but definitely not a year. And it can't get the 60 votes in the Senate. So President really wants the wall, but I don't think there's a scenario right now where there are enough votes to pass that in the United States Senate. But I will say this, the border security is significantly different than it was 2 years ago. You have I can't even explain how many less illegal border crossings that we have now. I think the ICE doing a good job on the border and things like that. So we've still got some drug issues coming from the southern border. I was in Logan County, which is one of our counties, a few weeks ago. I met with the Russellville Drug Task Force, and they were showing me crystal meth. I'd never seen crystal meth before. I'd seen meth before in Monroe County when they had drug busts and stuff. And this meth in Monroe County was made by guys that I didn't think were smart enough to even attempt to know how to do something like that. And it looked, in comparison to this crystal meth, pretty rough. This crystal meth looked like, you know, just something out of a movie or magazine or something. I said, that didn't come from these guys that are making this stuff in the woods. They said, no, it's coming from a lab in Mexico, right on the border. So we've still got issues with some of the drugs that are in this area coming from the southern border. So it's important that we try to do something to eliminate it, not cut it down, but eliminate it. So I support that, but I don't think that it's going to make it to the Senate right now. You had a question?
Yeah. You know, I know you're familiar with the H-2A program.
Yes, sir.
For workers, ag workers. Is there any possibility of expanding that? I mean,
we're
the manufacturing.
Yes.
To manufacturing.
We're trying to. We're trying to. Kevin Yoder is a congressman from Kansas. His wife grew up in Union County, graduated from Union County High School, which is one of our counties. You're in the same congressional district as Union County. That's a long way from Lebanon to Morganfield. Not Morgantown, Morganfield on the Ohio River. But he's trying to do that to get 300,000 more workers, not ag workers, but workers, into the economy because there's a shortage of workers. I mean, every industry is, we have as many plants threatening to leave the United States over not being able to get workers as we do the tax policy or regulations or the tariffs or anything else. I mean, there's a massive shortage of workers in America, and I recognize that, and we're trying to get those workers in. If you can't pass welfare reform, which is embarrassing to me that we can't pass that in Washington, then we're going to have to get some more H-2A, H-2B, H-2C. That's something that we're trying to. The two hardest bills, I'm a freshman. The two hardest bills that we have tried to pass in Washington and failed in both was health care and immigration. And the H-2A is in the immigration bill. So there's a guest worker bill that I'm a co-sponsor of. It's called the Goodlatte bill. All the immigration bills have been called the Goodlatte bill because he's the chairman of the judiciary. But so this is good lat number 3, I guess you could say. That's just for guest workers, for agriculture and for anything, manufacturing, construction. I don't know if Freddie's still in here, but I'm sure that there's a shortage of workers in every field, so there you are. So we're trying to do that. Anything else?
Well, thank you.
Yes,
Doctor.
sir. Thank you all.
Appreciate you coming.
I appreciate you all having me, and if there's ever anything I can do, let me know. Yes, sir.
How did you ever let Al Good in your district?
Yeah. So I have one precinct in Washington County. I don't know how you can have a district that big. 34 entire counties. The 2 most populated counties are McCracken, which is Paducah, and Christian, which is Hopkinsville. So we have Marion, Taylor, Casey, but not LaRue, Hart, or Barron. I have Metcalf, or Warren. So it's kind of a U shape. But I have one precinct in Washington County. It's Pottsville. If you know where Pottsville is, that's in our congressional district. So he's my contact in Pottsville.
You might have carried that last time.
Yeah.
We appreciate everyone coming. Thank you.